I was standing in my garage staring at an empty space where my brand new snowblower should have been, when I realized that someone had actually broken into my property and stolen it. The garage door was closed, the side door was locked, and yet my $2,000 machine had vanished into thin air like some kind of magic trick I never signed up to watch. My name is Ethan Davies, and I live in a quiet neighborhood in Naperville, Illinois, where the houses are cookie-cutter perfect, and the lawns are measured with rulers by people who have way too much time on their hands. I moved here 3 years ago after my divorce, thinking a fresh start in a peaceful suburb would help me get my life back on track. What I didn't count on was the Riverside Estates Homeowners Association and their president, a woman named Patricia Hendricks, who treated our neighborhood like her personal fiefdom. I pulled out my phone and checked the Ring app. I had cameras installed all over my property after someone kept leaving passive-aggressive notes about my garbage cans being visible from the street. The footage loaded and I watched in disbelief as Patricia herself, along with 2 men I recognized as HOA board members, opened my garage door at 7 in the morning, disconnected my snowblower, and wheeled it right out onto the street where they loaded it into a truck. The timestamp showed this happened yesterday while I was at my office downtown. I worked as a software engineer for a tech company and usually left around 6:30 in the morning, which they apparently knew. They had planned this. They had actually planned to steal my property. I saved the video file immediately and made 3 backup copies. Then I scrolled through my contacts until I found the name I was looking for. Judge Robert Morrison and I went way back to college at Northwestern University. We had been roommates for 3 years and stayed close friends ever since. He was now a circuit court judge in DuPage County, and while I never wanted to take advantage of our friendship, this situation definitely called for some legal guidance. "Ethan, long time no hear from," Robert answered on the second ring. "How's life in HOA paradise?" "They stole my snowblower from my garage," I said without preamble. "I have it on video. Patricia Hendricks and 2 board members broke into my property and took it." There was a long pause. "Please tell me you're joking." "I have 4 different camera angles. They used some kind of universal garage door opener and just walked right in like they owned the place." "That's breaking and entering, theft, and probably a few other charges," Robert said, and I could hear the disbelief in his voice. "What's their justification? Did they leave any kind of notice?" I walked back into my house and checked my mailbox. Sure enough, there was a certified letter from the HOA dated 3 days ago. I ripped it open and read aloud to Robert. "Dear Mr. Davies, it has come to our attention that you are storing unauthorized equipment in your garage that violates Section 12.3 of the Riverside Estates HOA bylaws. Specifically, gasoline-powered equipment must be stored in approved outdoor sheds and not in attached garages due to fire hazard concerns. You have 72 hours to relocate this equipment, or it will be confiscated for the safety of the community. Failure to comply will result in fines and potential legal action." "Did you get this 3 days ago?" Robert asked. "It's postmarked 2 days ago but dated 3 days ago. It arrived in my mailbox today. They backdated it and then stole my snowblower before I even received the notice." Robert let out a low whistle. "That's even worse. They're going to claim they gave you proper notice, but the postmark proves otherwise. Ethan, you need to file a police report immediately. This isn't a civil HOA dispute anymore. This is criminal theft." "What about the bylaw they're citing?" "Is that even legitimate?" "Doesn't matter. Even if the bylaw exists and is enforceable, which I doubt, they can't just break into your property and take your belongings. That's not how any of this works. They can fine you, they can take you to court, but they absolutely cannot steal your property. Call the Naperville Police Department right now. I'll make some calls on my end." I thanked Robert and hung up, then immediately dialed the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation to the dispatcher, who seemed skeptical at first until I mentioned I had video evidence. She told me an officer would be at my house within an hour. While I waited, I went through my HOA documents. I had a thick folder of paperwork from when I bought the house, including the complete HOA bylaws and covenants. I found Section 12.3 easily enough. It read, "Homeowners are encouraged to store gasoline-powered equipment in weather-appropriate outdoor storage facilities when possible to minimize fire hazards. Encouraged, not required." The language was a suggestion, not a mandate. Patricia had taken a recommendation and turned it into a law she felt empowered to enforce through theft. Officer James Mitchell arrived 45 minutes later. He was in his mid-30s, professional and thorough. I showed him the garage, the empty space where my snowblower had been, and then pulled up the video footage on my laptop. We watched together as Patricia and her accomplices opened my garage door at 7:15 in the morning. The video was crystal clear, showing their faces, their actions, and the truck's license plate. Officer Mitchell asked me to email him the footage immediately. "This is pretty cut and dry," he said, making notes. Breaking and entering, theft of property over $500, which makes it a Class 4 felony in Illinois. Possibly criminal trespass. "Do you know where your snowblower is now?" "No idea. They took it almost 24 hours ago." "I'll need to speak with Miss Hendricks." "Do you have her address?" I gave him Patricia's address, which was only 6 houses down from mine. She lived in one of the larger homes on the corner lot, with an immaculate garden and a flagpole in the front yard that flew both the American flag and some kind of HOA pride flag she had custom made. "I'll go speak with her now. I may need you to come down to the station to file a formal statement, but this video evidence is solid. Mr. Davies, I have to ask, have you had previous conflicts with the HOA?" I laughed bitterly. "Where do I start?" "Last year they fined me $500 because my mailbox was the wrong shade of black. Not joking. They have approved colors, and apparently mine was midnight black instead of carbon black. The year before that, they tried to fine me for parking my own car in my own driveway because it was visible from the street for more than 48 hours. I work from home twice a week. My car is always in the driveway those days." Officer Mitchell shook his head. "I've dealt with HOAs before, but this is next level. Stay here and I'll go talk to Miss Hendricks. I'll call you if I need anything else." He left, and I spent the next hour pacing around my house, alternating between anger and disbelief. My phone rang, and it was Robert again. "I talked to a colleague who specializes in property law," he said. "You have an airtight case, both criminal and civil. The criminal charges are obvious, but you can also sue the HOA and Patricia personally for the theft, for violating your property rights, and potentially for harassment given the pattern of behavior you've described. Document everything, every fine, every letter, every interaction." "I've been keeping records," I said. "I have a whole filing cabinet full of their nonsense." "Good. You're going to need it. I also want you to know that if this goes to court, and it probably will, I can't be the judge on your case because of our friendship. But I can recommend lawyers who will take this on, and I can provide guidance. What they did is so far beyond acceptable that I'm honestly shocked." We talked for a few more minutes before Officer Mitchell called me back. "Mr. Davies, I need you to come to Miss Hendricks' house. Bring your phone with the video footage." Something in his tone made my stomach drop. I grabbed my phone and laptop and walked down the street to Patricia's house. There were now 2 police cars parked in front, and I could see Patricia standing on her porch, arms crossed, face red with anger. Officer Mitchell met me at the sidewalk. Miss Hendricks is claiming that the HOA has the legal right to confiscate property that violates community bylaws. She showed me an amendment to the bylaws that was supposedly passed last year giving the board enforcement powers. I never received notice of any amendment. That's required by law. Any changes to HOA bylaws have to be voted on by the homeowners, and everyone has to be notified in writing. That's what I thought. Do you have your original bylaws? I pulled them up on my laptop and showed him Section 12.3 with its actual wording. Then I showed him the letter Patricia had sent me with her fabricated version of the rule. Patricia noticed us looking at the laptop and marched down from her porch. That equipment was a safety hazard and the board voted unanimously to remove it. We have every right to enforce our community standards. Madam, you broke into his garage and stole his property, Officer Mitchell said calmly. That's a crime regardless of any HOA bylaws. We did not break in. We used our emergency access rights. As HOA president, I have the authority to enter any property if there's a safety concern. Show me where that's written in the bylaws, I said. Patricia's face went even redder. It was in the amendment passed at last year's annual meeting. I was at that meeting. No such amendment was proposed or voted on. You're making this up. Officer Mitchell held up his hand. Miss Hendricks, where is Mr. Davies' snowblower? Patricia hesitated. It's been taken to storage for safety reasons until he can provide proper outdoor storage facilities. What storage facility? That's HOA business. Madam, I'm asking you as a police officer investigating a theft. Where is the snowblower? Patricia pressed her lips together. It's in my garage. The admission hung in the air like a bomb. Officer Mitchell looked at her steadily. You're admitting that you took Mr. Davies' property and it's currently in your possession. The HOA took property that violated community standards. It will be returned when he complies with the bylaws. That's theft and extortion, Officer Mitchell said. He turned to the other officer, a woman named Officer Sarah Chen, who had been standing quietly nearby. Let's retrieve Mr. Davies' property. Patricia sputtered. You can't just go into my garage without a warrant. You just admitted the stolen property is in there. That gives us probable cause. You can either open the garage voluntarily or we can get a warrant, which will take a few hours. Your choice. Patricia looked like she wanted to argue, but finally grabbed a remote from her pocket and opened her garage door. There sat my snowblower, exactly as I had left it, still with the same scratch on the side and my name written in silver marker on the handle. Officer Chen took photos while Officer Mitchell retrieved it and wheeled it down the driveway to me. Mr. Davies, is this your property? Yes, that's my snowblower. You can see my name right there. Patricia exploded. This is harassment. I am the HOA president and I was acting in the best interest of the community. He's been nothing but a problem since he moved here, constantly violating our standards and disrespecting our authority. Madam, HOAs don't have authority to commit crimes, Officer Mitchell said. You're under arrest for theft and criminal trespass. He actually pulled out handcuffs. Patricia's jaw dropped. You can't arrest me. I'm the HOA president. I was doing my duty. This is a civil matter, not criminal. You broke into his garage and stole his property. That's criminal. Officer Mitchell began reading Patricia her Miranda rights, while Officer Chen gently but firmly turned Patricia around and put on the handcuffs. Neighbors had started coming out of their houses, watching the scene unfold. I recognized most of them. There were Tom and Susan Winters from across the street, Mike Porter from next door, and at least a dozen others gathering on lawns and driveways. Patricia was put in the back of one of the police cars, still protesting loudly about HOA authority and community standards. Officer Mitchell came back to me. "Mr. Davies, can you come to the station tomorrow to file a formal statement? Bring all your documentation about the HOA issues." "Absolutely. What happens now? She'll be processed and arraigned. Given the nature of the crime and the evidence, she'll likely be released on bond, but she'll have criminal charges to deal with. You should also contact the other board members she mentioned. They were accomplices to the theft and could face charges too." I wheeled my snowblower back to my house, very aware of all the eyes watching me. When I got back to my garage, my phone started ringing. It was numbers I didn't recognize at first, but when I answered, it was Tom Winters. "Ethan, I saw what just happened. About half the neighborhood is in shock." "Can you tell me what's going on?" I gave him a summary of the events. He listened in silence. "I knew Patricia was overzealous about the HOA rules, but I never thought she'd cross a line like this," Tom said. "She fined us last month because our rose bushes were 3 inches taller than the maximum height allowed for front yard plantings. 3 inches. We had to trim them or face daily fines." "Did you keep the notice?" "Of course. I keep everything from the HOA because they're so ridiculous." "Hold on to it. I think this is going to become a bigger issue." Over the next few hours, I received calls from 6 other neighbors, all with stories about Patricia and the HOA board overstepping their authority. Fines for Christmas decorations being up one day past the allowed date. Fines for children's toys being visible in yards. Fines for car washing on Sundays, which apparently violated some noise ordinance Patricia had invented. The next morning, I went to the police station and filed my formal statement. I brought printouts of all my HOA correspondence for the past 3 years, organized chronologically. The detective handling the case, Detective Lisa Park, looked through the documents with growing disbelief. "This is a pattern of harassment," she said. "How many of these fines did you pay?" "Most of them, at first. I thought I was just supposed to comply. Then I realized half the fines were for violations of rules that didn't exist or were based on Patricia's interpretation of vague guidelines. I stopped paying about 6 months ago and told them I'd see them in court if they wanted to pursue it." "Did they take you to court?" "No. They just kept sending more letters threatening legal action. Detective Park made copies of everything." "Mr. Davies, I'm going to be honest with you. This case has gotten some attention in our department. The theft charge is straightforward, but the more we look into the HOA's activities, the more problems we're finding. We've had 3 other complaints filed this morning from your neighbors about HOA overreach. I can't give you details, but this might become a larger investigation." I left the station feeling vindicated but also worried. Patricia had been released on bond the night before, and I didn't know what her next move would be. I found out sooner than expected. When I got home, there was a new letter taped to my front door. It was from the HOA board, signed by the vice president, a man named Douglas Freeman. The letter informed me that I was being fined $2,000 for causing a public disturbance, damaging the HOA's reputation, and filing false police reports. It also stated that my HOA voting rights were suspended pending a disciplinary hearing. I took a photo of the letter and immediately called Detective Park. She sighed when I described it to her. "That's witness intimidation and retaliation. Bring it to the station. We're going to have a conversation with Mr. Freeman." I also called Robert, who was equally outraged. "They're digging themselves deeper. Every action they take is making their legal position worse. I've talked to a lawyer I know, Michelle Santos. She specializes in HOA disputes and property rights. She wants to meet with you." Michelle Santos turned out to be a sharp woman in her early 40s who had built her career on fighting abusive HOAs. We met at her office in downtown Naperville that afternoon. I brought all my documentation, and she spent an hour reviewing everything while making notes. "This is one of the worst cases I've seen," she finally said. "The theft is bad enough, but the pattern of harassment and these retaliatory actions create multiple causes of action. We can sue Patricia personally, the HOA board members individually, and the HOA as an entity. We can seek damages for the harassment, for your time and stress, punitive damages for their conduct, and we can ask the court to remove the current board and potentially dissolve the HOA entirely if their governance is beyond repair." Can we really dissolve the HOA? It's rare but possible. If we can show that the HOA board is acting in bad faith, violating state law and harming homeowners, a court can order the HOA dissolved or restructured. But that's the nuclear option. First, let's deal with the immediate issues. Michelle filed a lawsuit that same day. It named Patricia Hendricks, Douglas Freeman, and a third board member named Kenneth Walsh as defendants, along with the Riverside Estates HOA. The complaint detailed the theft, the harassment, the false fines, and the retaliation. We asked for actual damages, punitive damages, legal fees, and injunctive relief preventing the HOA from taking any further action against me. Within 24 hours, Michelle had also obtained a temporary restraining order preventing Patricia, Douglas, and Kenneth from contacting me directly or taking any HOA enforcement actions against me pending the resolution of the case. The neighborhood was buzzing. Tom Winters organized a meeting at his house for concerned homeowners. 23 families showed up, nearly half the neighborhood. Everyone had stories about Patricia and her board. Mike Porter stood up and described how he had been fined repeatedly for having a pickup truck in his driveway. She claimed commercial vehicles weren't allowed, even though I use the truck for personal use and the bylaws say nothing about pickup trucks. I've paid over $3,000 in fines in the past year. Susan Winters talked about being fined for having the wrong color mailbox. Just like Ethan, they have this approved color list that doesn't appear anywhere in the original bylaws. It was just something Patricia decided. One by one, neighbors shared their experiences. The picture that emerged was of an HOA board that had systematically overstepped its authority, invented rules, and used fines as punishment for anyone who questioned them. "I think we need to call for the board's removal," Tom said. "The bylaws allow for a special vote if 20% of homeowners petition for it. We have more than enough people here." We drafted a petition that night calling for the immediate removal of the HOA board and a special election for new leadership. Within 3 days, we had signatures from 32 of the 48 homes in Riverside Estates, well over the required threshold. Patricia tried to fight it. She sent a letter to all homeowners claiming the petition was invalid because of improper procedures. Michelle reviewed the bylaws and confirmed the petition met every requirement. She sent a letter to Patricia informing her that interfering with the special vote would result in additional legal action. The vote was scheduled for 2 weeks away. In the meantime, Patricia's criminal case moved forward. She appeared in court for her arraignment and pleaded not guilty. Her lawyer argued that she had acted in good faith as HOA president and had no criminal intent. The prosecutor, a young woman named Jennifer Garcia, presented the video evidence and argued that breaking into someone's garage and stealing their property was criminal regardless of intent. The judge, a stern-looking man named Judge Harold Chen, watched the video footage and denied Patricia's motion to dismiss. He set a trial date for 2 months out and modified Patricia's bond to include a condition that she have no contact with me and that she not perform any HOA duties pending resolution of the criminal case. Patricia was furious. She tried to argue that the judge couldn't prevent her from fulfilling her HOA responsibilities, but Judge Chen was unmoved. "Miss Hendricks, you're accused of abusing your position as HOA president to commit crimes. Until that's resolved, you're removed from that position. If the HOA needs leadership, the vice president can step in." But Douglas Freeman didn't want the job anymore. He came to my house 3 days before the special vote, looking exhausted and defeated. "I'm resigning from the board," he said. "I want to apologize for everything. Patricia convinced us that we were protecting property values and maintaining community standards. I never thought we'd cross the line into theft. I should have stopped her. I'm sorry." "Did you know she backdated that notice?" I asked. He nodded. "She told Kenneth and me that she had sent it earlier but needed a paper copy for her records. We believed her. When the police questioned us, we realized what she'd done. Kenneth is resigning too. We've both given statements to the police about our involvement." Douglas handed me an envelope. Inside was a check for every fine the HOA had ever assessed against me, plus $5,000. "This is my personal money," he said. "It's not enough to make up for what we did, but I want to make this right. I'm also voting to dissolve the HOA at the special meeting. This whole organization has become toxic." The special vote was held on a Saturday afternoon in the community center that the HOA maintained. Almost every homeowner attended. The air was electric with tension and anger. Michelle represented me at the meeting, though I was there too. Patricia tried to attend, but Michelle informed her that the restraining order prohibited her from being within 500 feet of me, and since I was attending the meeting, she needed to leave. Patricia argued and threatened, but eventually left when someone mentioned calling the police. The vote had 3 items on the agenda. First, removal of the current board. Second, election of a new temporary board. Third, a vote on whether to dissolve the HOA entirely or restructure it with new bylaws. The removal vote was unanimous. Every single homeowner voted to remove Patricia, Douglas, and Kenneth. Douglas had already resigned, but the vote made it official. For the temporary board, Tom Winters was elected president, Susan Winters became treasurer, and Mike Porter became secretary. They were given authority to govern for 6 months while a committee drafted new bylaws. The dissolution question was more complicated. Some homeowners wanted to end the HOA entirely. Others felt that a reformed HOA with proper oversight and limited powers could still serve the community. After 2 hours of discussion, we voted to keep the HOA but with major reforms. The new temporary board's first action was to void every fine that Patricia's board had issued for the past 3 years. Their second action was to hire an independent lawyer to review all HOA documents and actions for legal compliance. Their third action was to issue a formal apology to me and every other homeowner who had been unfairly targeted. Patricia's criminal trial began 6 weeks later. I sat in the courtroom with a dozen neighbors who had come to support me. Jennifer Garcia, the prosecutor, laid out the case methodically. She showed the video of Patricia and the board members breaking into my garage. She showed the backdated notice and the postmark proving Patricia had lied about providing proper notification. She called me to testify about the pattern of harassment. Patricia's lawyer tried to argue that she had acted in good faith and that the HOA bylaws gave her authority to enforce community standards. Jennifer demolished that argument by showing that Patricia had violated Illinois state law regarding HOA governance, that she had invented rules not in the bylaws, and that even if the bylaws had supported her actions, theft was still theft. The most damaging testimony came from Douglas Freeman. He testified under immunity and described how Patricia had become increasingly obsessed with controlling the neighborhood, how she had frequently talked about homeowners who didn't respect her authority, and how she had specifically targeted me after I questioned one of her fines. She called Ethan a troublemaker, Douglas testified. She said he needed to learn his place. When we saw the snowblower in his garage during a neighborhood walk, she immediately said it violated fire codes. I asked if that was actually in our bylaws, and she said we could make it a rule. She drafted the notice that night and told Kenneth and me to help her remove the snowblower the next day. She said if we didn't act, Ethan would continue to undermine the HOA's authority. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. They found Patricia guilty of theft, criminal trespass, and a third charge of official misconduct for abusing her position as HOA president. Judge Chen scheduled sentencing for 2 weeks later. In the meantime, Patricia's behavior became increasingly erratic. She started posting on social media about how she was the victim of a conspiracy, how ungrateful homeowners had turned on her, and how she had only been trying to protect property values. Several neighbors received threatening messages from her, which they reported to police. Patricia's bond was revoked, and she spent the week before sentencing in jail. At sentencing, Judge Chen was not sympathetic. "Miss Hendricks, you were given a position of trust and authority by your neighbors. You abused that position repeatedly. You invented rules, harassed homeowners, and ultimately committed theft to punish someone who dared to question you. Your lack of remorse and your continued harassment of witnesses shows that you don't understand the severity of your actions." He sentenced her to 2 years in prison, with the possibility of parole after 1 year. He also ordered her to pay restitution to me for the full value of the snowblower, my legal fees, and $10,000 in damages. Patricia's lawyer immediately filed an appeal, but she was taken into custody that day to begin serving her sentence. The civil lawsuit took longer to resolve. Michelle pushed forward with the case even after Patricia's conviction. We sued for damages not just from the theft, but from 3 years of harassment and illegal fines. Kenneth Walsh settled quickly. He admitted his role, apologized, and paid $15,000. Douglas Freeman had already paid his settlement before the trial. Patricia refused to settle. Her civil lawyer tried to argue that she couldn't be held personally liable for actions taken in her official capacity as HOA president. Michelle argued that Patricia had acted outside her authority and had committed intentional torts, making her personally liable. The civil trial happened 4 months after the criminal trial. By this point, the new HOA board had completed its review and had uncovered even more problems. Patricia had been embezzling HOA funds to cover her legal expenses. She had forged signatures on documents. She had used HOA money to pay for personal expenses and called them community improvements. The evidence was overwhelming. The jury awarded me $50,000 in actual damages and $200,000 in punitive damages. They also awarded damages to 3 other homeowners who had joined as plaintiffs, bringing the total judgment to over $400,000. Patricia would never be able to pay it. Her house went into foreclosure during the criminal trial. Her husband had divorced her. She had no assets. But Michelle said the judgment was important regardless. "It sets a precedent," she explained. "Other HOAs will see what happened here and think twice before abusing their authority. and you can garnish her wages if she ever gets out of prison and gets a job. The Riverside Estates HOA underwent a complete transformation. The new bylaws limited the board's authority to basic maintenance and finances. All rule changes required a vote of the homeowners. Fines could only be assessed for violations of rules explicitly stated in the bylaws. Any fine over $100 required an appeals process with an independent mediator. Tom Winters, as the new president, focused on bringing the community together rather than enforcing petty rules. He organized neighborhood barbecues and holiday events. He created a system where homeowners could volunteer for maintenance tasks to reduce costs rather than facing fines. Property values didn't collapse, despite Patricia's predictions. In fact, they increased slightly as word spread that Riverside Estates had reformed its HOA and was now a pleasant place to live. I kept my snowblower in my garage, right where it belonged. Nobody bothered me about it. In fact, after the first major snowfall that winter, 3 neighbors came by to borrow it because they didn't have their own. My friendship with Robert remained strong. He joked that I had provided him with the most interesting legal case story for his dinner parties. He told me that Judge Chen had specifically mentioned my case in a legal seminar as an example of HOA overreach and the importance of property rights. Michelle Santos became something of a celebrity in the property law world. She gave interviews about HOA abuse and how homeowners could protect themselves. She used my case as a template for other lawsuits against abusive HOAs across Illinois. The whole experience taught me several lessons. First, document everything. My cameras and my careful record-keeping made the case against Patricia ironclad. Second, know your rights. I had spent time reading the bylaws and understanding what the HOA could and couldn't do, which allowed me to recognize when Patricia crossed the line. Third, having a judge on speed dial didn't hurt, though Robert was quick to point out that any lawyer could have advised me the same way. He just happened to be a friend who cared. Most importantly, I learned that communities work best when leadership serves the residents rather than trying to control them. Patricia had seen herself as a ruler rather than a representative. The new HOA board understood that they worked for the homeowners, not the other way around. A year after the theft, I was sitting in my garage working on my car when Tom Winters stopped by. We had become good friends through the whole ordeal. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "What you did, fighting back against Patricia, it freed all of us." I was so tired of walking on eggshells in my own home, worried about which petty rule I might violate next. Now we have a community again, not a prison. "I just wanted my snowblower back," I said with a laugh. It was never about the snowblower. It was about standing up to a bully who thought she was untouchable. He was right, of course. The snowblower was just the catalyst. The real issue was years of accumulated frustration with an HOA that had forgotten its purpose. Patricia was denied parole after her first year. The parole board cited her continued lack of remorse and her disciplinary problems in prison. She had apparently gotten into several arguments with guards and other inmates about rules and authority. Some people never learn. Douglas Freeman became an advocate for HOA reform. He spoke at community meetings across Illinois about his experience and how HOAs could avoid becoming abusive. He was genuinely remorseful and worked hard to make amends. Kenneth Walsh moved away from Naperville. He paid his settlement and wanted nothing more to do with HOAs or community governance. As for me, I stayed in my house in Riverside Estates. It had become home, especially now that the community felt like an actual community. I kept my cameras running, not because I expected more trouble, but because they had proven their value. I kept my documentation organized. And I kept Robert's number on speed dial, though I hoped I'd never need to use it for legal emergencies again. The snowblower still sits in my garage, a reminder of everything that happened. It's more than just a machine now. It's a symbol of standing up for your rights, of refusing to be bullied, and of the importance of community accountability. Every time it snows and I fire up that snowblower to clear my driveway, I think about Patricia wheeling it out of my garage, so confident in her authority, so certain she was untouchable. I think about the look on her face when the police put her in handcuffs. I think about justice being served, both in criminal court and civil court. But mostly, I think about how grateful I am to live in a place where the rule of law matters, where cameras can capture the truth, where judges take property rights seriously, and where a community can come together to fix what's broken. The final chapter of the Patricia Hendricks saga came 18 months after the theft. Her appeal of the criminal conviction was denied. Her appeal of the civil judgment was denied. She would serve her full 2-year sentence and then face years of probation and financial obligations she would never be able to meet. The new HOA board commissioned a plaque to be placed in the community center. It read, Riverside Estates HOA. Dedicated to serving our community with transparency, fairness, and respect for homeowners' rights. Established 2008. Reformed 2025. At the dedication ceremony, Tom gave a speech about the importance of good governance and accountability. He thanked me publicly for having the courage to fight back. The entire community applauded and several people came up to shake my hand afterward. You saved this neighborhood, one elderly woman told me. I was planning to move because I couldn't deal with the stress anymore. Now I want to stay. That meant more to me than any legal victory or financial judgment. The point was never revenge or money. The point was making things right and ensuring that no one else would be victimized by an abuse of authority. My cameras still watch over my property. My snowblower still sits in my garage. My documentation files are still organized and up to date. But now they're just precautions, not necessities. The Riverside Estates HOA functions the way it should, and the community thrives because of it. Sometimes, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't had those cameras, if I hadn't kept such detailed records, if I hadn't had a friend who was a judge to guide me through the legal system. Would Patricia still be terrorizing the neighborhood? Would other homeowners have found the courage to fight back? I like to think that truth and justice would have prevailed regardless, but I'm practical enough to know that evidence and preparation made all the difference. The cameras caught Patricia red-handed. The documents proved her pattern of abuse. Robert's guidance helped me navigate the system efficiently. But at its core, this whole situation came down to something simple: standing up for what's right, even when it's difficult, even when it costs money and time, even when a person in authority tries to intimidate you into compliance. The snowblower was the theft that sparked everything, but the real crime was years of harassment and abuse of power. Patricia thought she could take whatever she wanted, fine whoever she wanted, and rule the neighborhood like her personal kingdom. She learned the hard way that America doesn't work like that. We have laws. We have property rights. We have courts that will listen when those rights are violated. I'm still in touch with Michelle Santos. She occasionally calls to ask about using my case as an example when she's teaching or speaking. I always say yes. If my experience can help other homeowners recognize and fight back against HOA abuse, then all the stress and hassle was worth it. Robert and I still meet for dinner once a month. We don't talk about the case much anymore. It's become just another story from our long friendship, though he admits it's one of his favorites. He says it reminds him why he became a judge in the first place, to ensure that the legal system protects regular people from those who abuse authority. The neighborhood kids play in their yards without their parents worrying about toy violations. People park their cars in their driveways without fear of fines. Homeowners paint their mailboxes whatever shade of black they prefer. Christmas lights stay up an extra day or two if people are busy. Life goes on, normal and peaceful the way it should be, and my snowblower, the machine that started it all, continues to do its job every winter. It clears my driveway, helps out my neighbors, and serves as a daily reminder that sometimes the little things matter most. Not because of their monetary value, but because of what they represent. Property rights matter. Personal boundaries matter. Standing up to bullies matters. And having the evidence to back up your claims when you do stand up, that matters most of all.